Hello, everyone. Rob Guest from football.london here, and welcome to the latest episode of Gold and Guest Talk Tottenham, sponsored by NordVPN. Joining me today, it's Alasdair Gold. Ali, how are you?
I like the fact that you didn't say as gold as ever like you normally do, because I haven't been able to do the last, was it one or two? Yeah, I'm okay. Hope you're well too. You're probably far more awake than I am, having just landed an hour or two ago on a 24-hour flight back. So yeah, apologies if I just come out with any more rubbish than normal, which I know there's a certain level of rubbish I come out with, but yeah, that's a long old flight. I tell you what, I have no idea how those players played a football match. I just, I was barely struggling to string words together to write my stuff. Yeah, fair play to them for doing that, and actually to a high, not a high degree. That's too much, but with a degree of energy that I didn't actually expect the game to have. So yeah, I did not have that energy, and I still do not now. But it was an experience. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, so it ended in defeat for Spurs on penalties, a bit of a surprise penalty shootout, fair to
Ange
say.
was shocked.
Yeah,
He went to shake hands with Eddie Howe. He had no idea what was happening. He was laughing about it in a presser after.
yeah, so it was 1-1 during the 90 minutes, and then Spurs losing 5-4 on penalties. Brian Hill missing Tottenham's first kick of the shootout, but I think all in all, a good exercise, and I think everyone inside the stadium, enjoyed their evening watching two Premier League teams there. I know Ange was surprised in terms of the penalty shootout. I think it was also surprised to see you there in his pre-match press conference.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, people might have seen the reaction, the double take he does, and then saying, "Yeah, bloody hell, Ali, how's it going?" kind of thing. It was. I think it was just like, why? Kind of essentially, why have you come all this way? We kind of have to. Do you really have to do this? It was quite funny because yes, I was the only UK media that was daft enough to do the trip. And look, there's so many sides to this trip, and I'm sure you guys probably debated it in the last podcast. And I get the criticism of it. I think a lot of the criticism is valid in terms of, you know, chucking these players out on a postseason game. They don't really need it. Although I would say my only answer to that one would be about Spurs. They have played one more than the bare minimum of any club, you know, because of going out of the cup competitions and not having Europe. So I don't think those players are shattered. But I absolutely agree that it's not the ideal scenario for anyone, especially the ones going off to international tournaments. And look, I know it's a cash grabbing thing. Of course it is. I don't think anyone's trying to dress it up as anything else. Of course it is, and I think we'll see a lot more of them, and a lot of clubs even next season. I think you'll see quite a few of them because it comes very handily before that financial deadline, doesn't it, for the FFP stuff? And you know, I think they're. I don't know about Spurs, but I certainly know some of the other clubs that have been heading out there. There's been talk of like 2-3 million kind of thing for a couple of games on the end of a season, and that for some clubs can be a massive thing in terms of not getting points deduction, as you well know. And that sounded more like a dig than it wasn't meant to be a dig. It was just like, because you're kind of gone through it.
Calculated. You
Yeah,
planned
yeah,
that.
it did. The way I said that really sounded like I was kind of like laughing at it. I was not. It was just Everton and Forest obviously know all about that. And maybe Man City will. We'll never know, maybe. So yeah, I get all that side of it, but being there in person, I did actually get to see the other side of the coin, and that was the Australian fans who they loved it. There was so much excitement around it in Melbourne. For a city that is like one of the, you've been there, it's like one of the biggest sporting cities in the world in terms of how much it has going on there. You walk down, it's called Olympic Boulevard, and you've got like the Rod Laver Arena, the MCG. You've got the Marvel Stadium's not too far up from there as well, where they play various sports in that one. You've got a couple of AFL stadiums up there as well. Yeah, it's a phenomenal kind of area of sport, and a city that just loves its sport. But football isn't probably the biggest thing that's there. But for that one day, all the streets in Melbourne, I could see Newcastle shirts, could see Spurs shirts, and I spoke to a lot of them because the beauty of Melbourne is a very walkable city. So you kind of can walk to the stadium, and on that walk, just chatting away to everyone and how excited they were at the game, and that's the side of it. I know we can be a little bit kind of see the bad side of it from the UK perspective, but when you kind of take yourself and put them in their shoes, to be able to see their heroes, and we always say this about the summer tours as well, just to see these people that they will stay up in the middle of the night, 2, 3 in the morning, whatever, to watch these guys most weeks. To be able to see them in the flesh just for one night is a pretty cool thing, and that's why they're almost 80,000 packed into the MCG, because it was a big event. And so I was the madman that went and covered it for the English press. Obviously, there's a lot of local journalists, and yeah, when Ange saw me, he was a bit surprised, to say the least. But it was good. We had a bit of fun with it, and it's one of those weird things where maybe, I mean, I was going to say we've probably forged a bit of a connection after a year of kind of me covering him and asking him a billion questions over it all. But I think, yeah, we had a kind of like a funny little back and forth in both the press conferences. He used me as like an example of the harsh English press already looking at transfers and the aftermath of the game and stuff like that with the local journalists, which he found very funny. But it's a great experience. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend to anyone to fly to Australia, do 48 hours of traveling for about 48 hours in Melbourne. It's it's an experience. That's probably the best way to put it. And I'm probably going to have to adjust. I was so confident as well. I must admit, when I got to that press conference before the match, I thought I timed it all well, slept really well that night when I arrived in Melbourne, and I was a bit, I'd say, cocky and overconfident. There was some Spurs staff there who all looked shattered because the team had flown in at like 5 a.m. that morning. And I'm like, oh, I had a great sleep. Yeah, I'm doing really well, thanks. Yeah, really great. And then that next night, I slept 3 hours and it ruined me. I just lay, like Madison said a very similar thing, just lay there in bed looking at the ceiling. You're like, I don't want to look at my phone. I don't want to do anything else because I don't want to kind of like just start getting properly awake, but you just cannot get back to sleep. So yeah, don't do it. Anyone, don't do it. If you're going to go to Australia, which is an amazing place, and Melbourne, which is an amazing place, make sure you're there for a decent amount of time, because it was daft, but gives us loads to talk about. So that's a good thing as well.
It does. Was it Kieran Trippier who said pre-match it's not like you fly into Benidorm or somewhere like that? And
Yes.
Ange never heard of Benidorm, had he?
No, and then a few journalists pointed out what it was like, and Michael Bridge from Sky said, "You'd love it, I love it," and Ange said something to the effect of, "Oh well, I'm definitely not going there if you love it." Then kind of thing. It was, yeah, I can imagine Bridgie being a Benidorm man actually, but yeah, it definitely wasn't Benidorm. That would have been much easier for everyone to go to. Yeah, it was. You could just tell the players. I think the players were knackered. The players were shattered. And even in that first presser, when he saw me, he stifled a yawn at the start of it. And I was like, even me, I'm thinking, I know it would be kind of good from a media perspective, but don't do it. Like the whole narrative will be kind of sown by that one moment. He just about kind of closed his mouth and stopped himself yawning. But yeah, I think, and a few of the players said it, the thing that made it was the reaction of the fans. I think they realised kind of what it was all about on that side of the world anyway. But yeah, it was funny to see their faces as well, and how knackered they looked in that first training session.
Yeah, speaking of the first training session, there was a video on Tottenham's Instagram account. I think that surprised, a dad and his lad said, "Oh, you can come closer and watch the players get all the autographs after the game," and that was a really nice moment. So I think the dad had surprised his son. He'd not told him basically they were going, and then they'd mentioned to him, right, here's a wristband, you can come and watch training a bit closer. And he looked like he was nearly going to cry. I think that just shows you how nice it is, for the people who don't get to see these Premier League players, play week in, week out, to, see them and then see them up close. And it was really good post-game as well, when all the fans remained, and then the Tottenham players went around. It was a big, suitcase full of training kit. They didn't want any more, and they were chucking that into...
did they do that after the game as well?
Yeah,
they did that at training. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, did that after the game. So quite a few of the young lads were throwing them into the crowd.
Nice.
Players as well, I think they were taking the shirts off, the jackets, giving them out. So yeah, really, really good. I know we're maybe quite critical of it flying 24 hours or so for one postseason friendly match, but when you look at it with the fans, what it meant to them, it's great from that perspective. I think probably another good thing for Spurs is they didn't take on the A-League All-Stars, because I think they beat Newcastle 8-0 today.
Oh, did they? I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
It would have been while I was in the air.
It
Yeah.
was a very, very young Newcastle team, but
Makes sense.
even still, but no, really, really good. But on my previous comment about Benny Dorm, I think that's probably an ideal one for next year. Not commercially as attractive, but in terms of a flight, probably better.
Well, yeah, we could suggest that, I guess. But what I found fascinating was the dynamic in terms of kind of who was there for what reason. And obviously, a lot of Spurs fans there, and I think Spurs and Newcastle both sold out their allocation that they had. I think it holds 100,000, so like 80,000 or 78,000, whatever it was very good. I think it was just the general ones. And as you pointed out to me on the night, some of those areas that were left kind of used were the areas that were a bit blocked off by the dugouts and things like that, because of the way that it's set up for a cricket ground. So if you're going to go really low down on one side, you're not going to see anything. It's not for looking down on something from those levels. Whereas obviously cricket's very, very different in terms of what you need to see and how you see it. But the dynamic of, because Melbourne is Postecoglou City. It is, he arrived there as a 5-year-old, and it's the place where he was kind of bred and created him really, and what he became, and they love him, they do. And I wrote a little piece. I think it was my newsletter piece that went out this week about the fascinating different dynamics between, because there were a lot of Korean fans had gone to see Sonny, because for them it's 4 hours less, I think, than flying to England, to the UK, to come and see him. So there was a big, healthy kind of dollop of Korean fans all there to see Sonny, but then the whole rest of the crowd was very much Ange fans and everything, and just the different way to do it. With Ange, well, we know with Sonny, it's like it's amazing. It's like almost an idol, isn't he, to them? It's just like it's almost like kind of a worship in a football way, I guess, and the way, and they treat him with such respect, and it's just so lovely to see the way they are around him. And you and I have both seen the queues that they now have outside the training ground every time. Every day. I was going to say press conference. It's actually every day. Some days he's not even there, and they're queuing up. You kind of feel really sorry because they'll stand there in rain and everything. Whereas with Ange, it's like a pride thing. It's like one of our own. Like one of our city's sons has kind of dragged himself up from, well, he's an immigrant. He came across on a boat from Greece with his family, and he's raised himself up to be the manager of one of the most famous soccer, as they sometimes call it over there, teams in the world. And it's a pride thing. And the way they treat him, and the way when he's walking by, it's not like it isn't this kind of worship thing. It's more like, well done, mate. Like you're one of us kind of thing, and you've made it to the big time. It's lovely. And he got such a huge ovation, both at the training. There was about 7,600 at the training, I think it was. And then, like I said, at the 78,000 at the MCG. And even the Newcastle fans, certainly the Australian ones, there'd been a part of them would have been like, there's a pride for Ange as well. They did this montage pre-game, which it had all these like his teams and him. Actually had him scoring in a penalty shootout as well, which was quite interesting. And yeah, various of his teams playing and everything. And then they used the Alan Brazil moment when he couldn't pronounce his name on the radio. And he was like, is this a wind-up kind of thing? And it was like, and then showed Celtic absolutely smashing people in the Scottish Premiership. And it just finished with the word Ange across the screen. It was like really nice. You can just see, like I say, it's pride. That's what it is. Although there were some other strange things that happened pre-match. Like, the teams were warming up, and they suddenly switched all the lights off, made it dark, and did a light show. And it was like, you could just see players like kind of, where am I? Who am I passing to? You can imagine if someone launched a ball, they ran into each other. Spurs pretty much came off at that point. Newcastle stayed out there. I have no idea why, because they were kicking the ball around in the pitch black. Yeah, that was a bit of an odd one. But yeah, it was really interesting to see that dynamic. And then when Sonny came off, oh my goodness, it was like the entirety of Korea had been slighted. You could just hear all the Korean fans boo. And it's like, the guy's run himself ragged. He actually really put a shift in Sonny. And and just to hear the boos, and then they realise, oh, we've got to cheer him as he's coming off now, otherwise it sounds like we're booing him. I love all stuff like that. I love the way that different people and different cultures support either the team, managers, stars in that team, whatever. I always find that so fascinating.
Right, we'll move on to the game then. I don't think we really knew what kind of team Ange was going to put out, because he took a 24-man squad with him, a number of, pretty much all of the first team squad who were fit. There was no Christian Romero, Giovanni Lo Celso, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, and then there was a number of the youngsters. And all Ange did, it was basically the team that played Sheffield United, with Emerson Royal coming in for Christian Romero, and then Brandon Austin taking Guilherme Vicario's place in net. And I mean, like I said, we just didn't know what team he was going to do. But I suppose when you've got 75,000 fans plus turning up, you've got to do what's right by them as well and put out a strong team. And that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, I think so. I was trying to get a kind of a handle on what the lineup, or what kind of lineup it might be ahead of the game. I was like speaking to various people. Was like, will it be a blend? Will you get some of the youngsters so that you've got a strong second half, because you'll have a couple of first team like stars in the second half, and no one really knew. I think, it was quite. We were kind of in the dark a little bit about what it was like the Newcastle players were in the warm up, and it was. Yeah, it was. Like you say, I think it's a good thing for the fans. I thought it was nice for them to see them all there, and then also, personally, I really enjoyed watching the team of young players in the second half, and how well they played on the whole as well, and seeing, and I think that was good for them in a way, because a lot of them know how to play alongside each other. They've done it week in, week out for the under-21s or some of the under-18s, and it just created two very different halves of football. But I don't know how it looked from afar, but Spurs kind of took it semi-seriously. They really kind of put a lot of effort in. There was a lot of pressing high up the pitch. I mean, the goal came from pressing high up the pitch, although I think probably VAR would have ruled it out in the Premier League for the little handball. But I thought Spurs players actually put in more energy than I thought they would have after that flight. They did fine, and any other day they score a hatful of goals as well, because they created a fair few chances. But it's a friendly. It's one of those where we're kind of loath to overanalyze too much, but there are certain things we can take from it.
Yeah, I thought they were really unlucky to go in on level terms in the first half, because Newcastle didn't really create much. It was Tottenham who had the better chances throughout that first 45 minutes. Well taken goal from James Maddison, but it was a really poor pass from Nick Pope, who is an excellent keeper, but passing and, ball work's never been his strong point. But good finish from Maddison. It did, bounce up and hit him on his hand when he was trying to control it. And as you said, probably would have been ruled out in the Premier League, but he took it well. Brennan Johnson, matter of inches away from doubling the lead. I think that was from Son's ball.
Yeah, great bit of play from Son, yeah.
From the left, and then we almost had a moment when Emerson scored. That was both fullbacks combining, and I think it was Emil Kraft who got in there to cut out Porro's ball to Emerson, and you'd have probably backed Emerson to score from there, where it was.
He did. He sent a header wide as well, Emerson. He had a couple of chances. He was really busy. He had a very busy display.
Well, in the second half, he was the furthest player forward. I think it was from a corner. Spurs broke. Sonny was running with it, and Emerson, who probably been right back at that time because George Abbott came on at the start of the second half.
He switched,
He was the furthest player forward. He was in the penalty box. But yeah, first half performance, I thought Spurs were really good. Like I said, Newcastle, I'm struggling to think of the opportunities they had on goal.
Well, I've got the stats for you if you want them. There's like 18 shots Spurs had. Newcastle had 4.
Yeah, I think
kind of shows it.
Isak curled one wide early on. I think there was a chance when Almiron went through, but Van der Ven used his pace to, get back and make sure he couldn't get a shot away on target. And then Newcastle did score right on the stroke of halftime. Worked it well. Ball to Jacob Murphy, who put it across. I think Brandon Austin should have really done better with it. personally.
agree. I
Yeah,
agree.
got a hand to it, just palmed it out, and it was straight to Isak, who tapped home. Prior to that, Austin, I can't think of anything he had to do.
He made one good
Really.
claim. I remember it was either from a cross or a corner. I can't remember
Yeah,
what it was. I remember that being quite good.
but in terms of dealing with shots,
Yeah, it
I
wasn't
don't think he
anything
had
really.
anything to do. So I think he himself probably will feel he should have done better with it. But he's just one of these things, really. He's not played any football at all this season, just because it's been Fraser Forster who's been in goal
I think he
in the
hasn't really played
Carabao
under
Cup.
21s. Yeah, the odd under 21 match as an overage player. I don't even know if he's done
Maybe.
that.
No.
No, I think it's mostly been Luca Gunter.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it would. Again, I was about to say, would you put any blame on for the goal? And it was a bit like it's friendly, but would you put any blame on Emerson, Murphy getting by him? I think
Maybe.
probably
We'll
we
have
would
to
in a
watch it
normal
again.
Premier League. Yeah, on a Premier League match, we probably would. But again, I'm so loath to be too critical in a friendly. Because, yeah, like I said, Emerson was really busy. He was everywhere. And it was a fascinating game because, for some of these players, it may be the last time we see them in a Spurs shirt. And it's very. I don't know whether Emerson will. There's a lot of interest in Emerson. I mean, more probably, Brian Hill, players like that, and maybe Oliver Skip. We'll talk about him as well. Obviously, we didn't get to see Højbjerg, but what did you think of? Again, I'm very wary of saying, what did you think of this? I'm still going to do it, but Dragusin and Van der Ven, we kind of got to see them as a pairing, which I don't think we've really seen. Have we seen them yet in a game? Maybe no, I don't think at all because Romero hasn't come off in any game, has he?
No, and when Dragusin started in March, that was because Van der Ven was injured and he was on the bench, I think, against Luton. So, no, we've not really seen them together at centre-back. We've maybe seen a bit of a partnership in terms of Dragusin at left-sided centre-back and Van der Ven at left-back. But no, I thought the copes well on the whole, didn't really have a lot to do. I know you pointed out to me that, they were going into challenges 100%. They weren't shaking, tackles when maybe some would have with the Euros on the horizon.
Both are going to Euros, aren't they? Yeah. Well, hopefully.
They are. Yeah. So, yeah, I thought they performed well. Whether or not we're going to see that partnership next season, I don't know. Maybe we'll on occasions, especially with Tottenham in the Europa League now. Probably going to give Ange a chance to rest Christian Romero at times. So
Romero misses games, and not a lot.
Yeah.
I think he's been quite, consistent this season, but he will pick up the odd knock. So that's a very talented pairing to be able to put together, Dragusin and Van der Ven, and Dragusin's height, I think is a big thing with the aerial stuff too. So yeah, like you said earlier, I think the one real big chance they had, and it was kind of a bit of a gift to them from Austin, and that was their kind of main thing on the day that I can remember.
Yeah, I think for Dragusin as well, it's good for him to finish the season on a bit of a positive. Really good showing against Man City. He was decent again against Sheffield United. And then because he's just been so used to playing week in, week out at Genoa, he's come to Tottenham, he's been getting minutes here and there. He's had a little bit of a mini run in the team towards the end of the season, and hopefully that's going to bode well for him going into the Euros with Romania.
will be delighted, won't they, at that?
Yeah, exactly. And then he'll be looking for, a really big first full season at Tottenham in 24-25.
Yeah. What do you think of Decky in the central role again? Because you were there, Sheffield United, so you kind of got to see what that was like.
Did all right again. I think he had more of an impact against Sheffield United. I can't really think of many opportunities he had on goal, but he linked well with Johnson and Son. He's just, as I was saying to Wilmer on the last pod, it's like, why haven't we seen this before Sheffield United? It just seems to make sense. Someone who's, got a bit of power and strength about them who can be a focal point up front, as he was away at Luton in October when Tottenham needed him, when they were down to 10 men to hold up the ball and that. And then you've had Son in the role where he struggled and then looked so much better when he was on the left against Sheffield United on the final day. Maybe we will see it on a few occasions next year, but I think fingers crossed for everyone that Spurs will be signing the striker. And then it may only be, if there's a bit of an injury crisis where you see Decky through the middle. But I think he did okay against Newcastle and certainly gives Spurs an option going forward.
Yeah, and I think for Brennan Johnson, he showed again that he unfortunately does sometimes miss quite big chances himself as well, and that's been a little bit of a theme. I think he's contributed loads. I mean, double figures in assists, which is terrific. Was it 4 or 5 goals as well? But he's a very young player, and I think moments like that show what he's still got to do. I felt sorry for Brian Hill because obviously he was the only kind of penalty that was missed in the shootout. But I actually thought he was quite bright when he came on as well, attacking wise, albeit against a very much changed Newcastle side in that second half. But yeah, it was, again, we don't want to go overboard in the kind of analysing of a friendly match in terms of the senior players with differing levels of motivation, things like that. But yeah, there was still the foundation of the football that we're going to see next season, and that's probably my biggest takeaway from this season is seeing that those seeds of that sown for next season is quite exciting.
Yeah. Before we move on to what happened in the second half, Ali, do you want to let everyone know about the benefits of using NordVPN?
Of course, that's from experience again. This time, being able to, well, it was very difficult. That was my kind of, even more so than the travelling. The biggest kind of downside for it to me of going to Australia was that I wouldn't be able to be at the final game of the Premier League season at Sheffield United. Thankfully, Nord kind of helped me out in that respect because I was able to watch the game actually while in the air, using that as well. So yeah, it kind of yeah, helped me out again as it has done many times over the years, which is why I've got no issues kind of promoting it and telling people how good it is, and obviously people then get back to us and say how good it is. So it's not just me, and I say it every week, and because it's true, NordVPN is the fastest VPN in the world. It means there's no buffering, no lagging, and like I did, you can stream whatever you want to watch from anywhere in the world without your bandwidth throttling. You can make your device think it's in a completely different country and able to watch whatever you want to do. You can make it think it's back in the UK, so you can watch your UK stuff when you're abroad. Yeah, it's incredibly helpful for stuff like that, and it's also good to a degree for a security aspect when you don't want people to take anything off your device when you're using public Wi-Fi. Certainly I was using it for that when I was in and around Melbourne. Working in the coffee houses of Melbourne while I was ploughing through my articles those 2 days and using Nord to help me out there as well. And not only that, but the outlay on a NordVPN subscription is cheaper for you in the long run, and that's because you can purchase streaming services or bookings from other countries at a much cheaper rate. So, for example, as well as everything I've just said, you could book flights from another country, and that could be cheaper doing it that way too. So it means you're paying out for Nord, but you're actually saving money overall. There's a whole host of other benefits from signing up to NordVPN, so why not give it a go? To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/Gold Guest. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and every time you click on that link and get NordVPN, you are helping our podcast, and it's greatly appreciated. And if you missed that link, it's in the episode description box.
So in the second half in the game at the MCG, we saw multiple changes. I think, towards the end of it was very much like 2 academy teams taking on each other. Just a really good opportunity, to give the talented youngsters an opportunity to show what they can do in the first team. And I think for Spurs, 23 of the 24 players played. The only player not to feature was Guglielmo Vicario. I think you'd probably be a bit angry in terms of you taking me all the way to Australia and have not played at all. But I think
he got to speak to me. He got to do an interview with me. I'm sure that made it worth all the 48 hours, the travel.
I'm sure it did. But I think when you probably look at the bigger picture for him, he's going to be, he has been named in Italy's provisional squad for the Euros. Yeah. The last thing you want to be doing is getting some game time and then getting an injury, potentially what rules you out of the Euros. So one of these things for Vicario, but it did give Brandon Austin and Alfie Whiteman a chance in goal. But in terms of the youngsters who came on, who caught the eye for you?
Well, there's quite a few. You just kind of made me think there. I wonder why he didn't do Austin 45 and Alfie Whiteman 45. Maybe it's because, we've said it a while back that Austin, there was, positive talks over a new contract. Maybe it was just to do with that, giving him a bit of extra game time. I don't know. But in terms of the youngsters, I mean, just to quickly list them off, the ones that were there, you had George Abbott, Alfie Devine, Ashley Phillips, Jamie Donnelly, Tyrese Hall, Iago Santiago, Dane Scarlett, and making their first appearances for the, on one of these were Rio, Kieran Martin, and Leo Black, both under, Rio's under 21s midfielder, Leo's under 18s midfielder. Tyrese Hall was quite exciting to watch. That lad is confident. Just the way he kind of played the ball around the pitch. It was very difficult for anyone to get the ball off him. He was only on for like 19 minutes or so. I thought he was very good, and his penalty absolutely spoke volumes about the kind of confidence he had. I think it was just great for them to play in front of 80,000 people. It's something that none of them will have done yet. Obviously, Jamie Donnelly's had a few Premier League experiences this season, but Alfie Devine, and Ashley Phillips both got their experience with certainly Plymouth in the second half of the season together. But they're not going to have played in front of that sort of crowd. And even the penalty shootout, I know it was like a silly little daft thing tagged on the end, which no one expected. But just to get those young players in front of a massive crowd, feeling a tiny bit of pressure as they ran up to take kicks, I think was a good experience for them when they go into anything like that in the future. So Tyrese definitely stood out. I thought George Abbott was solid. Ashley Phillips looked very good, looked very kind of assured, as he should. Was he Plymouth's Young Player of the Season, wasn't he? Was he nominated? I think
he was, and that was his very first Tottenham appearance as well.
Oh, weird. Yeah, I guess it would be, yeah. Did he not play a single minute of any of the friendlies at all last summer? Wow.
I had a look back at it. He signed early August. He wasn't involved in the squad for the Shakhtar friendly, but he was in this squad for the Barca game. Didn't come on though.
Well, weird. Yeah, he looked very assured. It was one like sliding interception he made that I remember being very good. Alfie had a good little moment late on. I think he set up Dane. Dane did well in terms of got into some really good positions, but had 3 chances that he should have put at least one of them away, I think. He looks like he's bulked up. Kind of see him on the pitch and then seeing him walk through the mix zone as well afterwards. He does look like he's been working on his physique, which is good. That's kind of what he's going to need to hold up the ball in any kind of football. I'm intrigued to see what they do with him in terms of whether he gets a shot now as like one of the backup attackers, or whether they look for another loan that's far more successful than the Ipswich one, maybe. It'd be interesting to see which way that goes. Jamie Donnelly, I think he's had a little bit of a knee issue recently, but he looked very calm and assured when he came on. His penalty was lovely. So probably the pick of the bunch for me. It was a really nice curling penalty. Iago Santiago's an exciting winger. He always is. He created a lot of problems. I feel with him, it's a really interesting one. I think we've said this before. I feel like there's a bit of the Anthony Georgiou about him, in that you can see he's talented. You can see he's a tricky winger that causes problems. But for some reason, he's got to the age of 21 and they just haven't really given him that chance in the first team. And he's been on the bench a fair few times this season. But whatever Postecoglou seems to be seeing in maybe training just isn't lending itself to just even giving him a minute, which surprises me. And I think a lot of the people watch the academy games because he is such a threat. But yeah, it's interesting that he's kind of got to 21 and maybe he does need a loan. Maybe he needs to get out there and prove himself in kind of first team football. But yeah, and everyone else, Rio and Leo both came on and didn't look out of place. And that's always the biggest thing, I think, for people when they're making their first appearances like this. And he kind of had Oliver Skip marshalling. He was like the grand old master of them all, him and Emerson. But Oliver Skip mainly as the inspiration for them. Whatever people want to say about him, he passed 100 appearances for Spurs this season. He is what they all want to aspire to be and get in that team.
Very much so. He's, started in the academy, made it through to the first team, and being a regular for Tottenham at times. And yeah, then he came on in the holding role, didn't he, in midfield, and ended up at centre back just because of the lack of centre backs of Spurs at the minute. He was the captain, scored his penalty as well. good performance from Skip. In terms of the other youngsters, I thought Tyrese Hall was brilliant in 19 minutes. Just didn't look out of place at all. Just so confident, and didn't he registered 94% pass success rate?
Nice.
Completed 29 of his 31 passes, and you know, within an hour of the full-time whistle, there was a Tyrese Hall compilation on social
Really?
media. Yeah, so I was watching it, and the one thing I noticed was very rarely gave the ball away.
Yeah, I
And
noticed that. Yeah,
made a couple of good runs, a nice back heel as well to set up Dane Scarlett, I think, in stoppage time. So good performance, and as is always the case in pre-season, a number of youngsters, you know, go on the pre-season tours, might get some minutes, might not. I think regardless of players who are going to be missing or not in the summer because of the Euros and the Copa America, I think Tyrese Hall should be in there anyway, just to give him, you know, a bit more experience of the first team environment, a chance for Ange to take a closer look at him, because Tottenham do appear to have, you know, a very, very good player on the hands in Tyrese Hall, and, you know, his penalty was just coolness personified, really. Straight down the middle, just rolled it in. It was very good. But Iago Santiago was good as well on the right wing, putting some good balls. Notably one for Dane Scarlett, who just pretty much just flung himself at that to get his head on it. Just went wide, and Dane was lively in his playing time, looked to do whatever he could to try and get his name on the score sheet. And it would have been nice to see him get a few more minutes under his belt. And the same goes at Sheffield United on the final day, because, you know, the game was won by then. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Dane in the summer, whether it is another loan to help aid his development, or whether he does remain with Spurs for a bit longer. But I think everyone probably would like to see a bit more of Dane.
I mean, maybe a lot depends on what happens with Richarlison. There's been still talk about him maybe heading off. There's Saudi interest in him. I suppose if he were to go, because we know, you know, they're going to sign a striker. That's what they want as one of their signings this summer. So whether, if you haven't got Richarlison there, whether you then bring in two, or whether you have the other striker, but I suppose you're putting yourself back to square one again, aren't you, where you were? And with Europa League, you're going to need two or three there, because I think Valise will probably go out on loan again, because I think the whole homegrown issue, you know, whether he's even going to be able to register for European football, I don't know with Valise. Whereas with Dane, the club trained aspect of it probably makes sense to keep him for those games. Yeah, I think that's probably going to have to swing it in his favour of sticking around, really. And it just feels like he's one of those players that just needs something to happen for him. Just maybe that first goal, and then he kind of kicks on from there. I was just thinking about Tyrese Hall. What a fortnight he's had. Did he sign a big new deal for like 5 years? Then was in his first ever Premier League squad, and now he's impressing at the MCG in front of 80,000 people. What a way to end your season. Well, it's actually not ended yet, because that was the other thing I was going to say. A lot of those players are going to have to. We talk about how the effects on the other players. A lot of those young players have got a Premier League 2 playoff final to play on Sunday at the Spurs Stadium. They are, you know, I hope they adjust. I mean, they would have got back. I've got back this morning. They left about 12 hours or so before me, or more. So they would have been back yesterday. Hopefully Friday and Saturday, to get their bodies back in sync with the UK. Yeah, and also I guess take some confidence from playing in those surroundings too. So yeah, a lot of them are going to be back in action again. I hope they finish off their season high, because Wayne Burnett's side have been brilliant this season. They've just kind of run out of a little bit of steam with the Premier League Cup final, because they just had so many matches and so many injuries all at the same time. But yeah, as I said at the top of this, I really liked kind of watching. I think there was a lot of kind of the Australian journalists a bit like, "Who's that? Who's that?" And they kind of lost the kind of plot of the game. Whereas for me, I was like, this is probably the even more interesting bit for me, because we can't really learn anything more about the first team players, because we see them week in, week out. But to see these young players in a different environment was fascinating. And yeah, I think every single one of them kind of did themselves no shame at all, really. I think they all looked perfectly capable of being there. I mean, George Abbott's had a very good season as well as the under-21s captain for a chunk of it, certainly. He made his Premier League debut, didn't he, in the final game last year under Ryan Mason? He signed a new deal as well, a couple of months back. So, yeah, there's a lot of talent there, and obviously we didn't even speak about like Mikey Moore wasn't there. He was off, tearing it up at the end of the 17 European Championship, scoring 2 against France. One of them was a beauty of solo goal. I haven't seen the other one. But I did see the solo goal. You got Will Lancashire. I do feel a little bit sorry for Will Lancashire, unless he's got like a little knock or something, and they're just saving him for Sunday. But just named Premier League 2 Player of the Season. He scored something like 33 goals this season. And I did feel a bit like, you could have maybe taken him out on that tour, but maybe there was something else. Maybe there is a bit of he has played a lot of games. Maybe that's what it's to do with, give him a bit of rest before Sunday, because there is high hopes for him. They really like him. Postecoglou's looked at him a few times and likes him. I would hope that he's on that pre-season tour in the summer to Japan and Korea, because I do think they need to have a little look at him on a bigger stage. He's certainly got something about him. He's an incredible finisher, and he's a big lad, so he can hold the ball up well. So, we're talking about Dane, and we've got Troy Parrott still to come back from a really good season in the Netherlands. In terms of young strikers, you could put Mikey Moore in there if you want. He can kind of play on the wing, play in the middle, he can play in the midfield role. But they've got a lot of young talent there in the attacking slots. But is he going to use them? But Europa League football is going to help, isn't it? Let's be honest. I think that's the thing that was missing. And he said it himself. I think he was missing that thing to be able to use more of the squad and potentially younger players as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think Europa League, because it's expanding next year, it's going to be 8 group games, rather than finishing in, the middle of December like it usually does. It's going to be 2 rounds of fixtures in January. So 8 games. I think there'll be around the 16 quarters, semis, potentially another 7 games after that. So there's going to be an awful lot of football to be played, especially compared to the season just gone, where Spurs played 41 in total, 42 if you're including this friendly against Newcastle. And Spurs aren't used to that, because they're always, in recent years anyway, have had European football and maybe have gone through the group stage into the knockout phase. So, there's definitely going to be opportunities there for Spurs next year. And let's see what the draw brings, because I don't exactly know how it works now, because it's just a new style of competition, and I don't think it's seeded, is it, like the previous draws? So I have no idea who Spurs are going to get in the Europa. What type of teams.
We can start looking towards next season now, can't we? And actually, just as we speak, we're talking about Dane Scarlett has just been included in the England Elite League squad to take on Sweden, the Republic of Ireland, and Croatia next month. Elite League, they used to call it under 20s, didn't they? So that's good for him.
Yeah,
more international football.
Yep. And in terms of the European games, is it 11 subs, 12 subs usually on the match day? So there's going to be spaces there for, the club's youngsters to be given an opportunity. So, Spurs are going to need a big squad for next season.
They are. And that's been one of the things I think people have held against Postecoglou this year is 2 things, really. It's probably not changing up teams enough, or changing them up too much, maybe for the Fulham game, or not using the young players. And now he's going to have to rotate. He's going to have to bring these players in. That's always one of those fascinating things with fans, isn't it? Is that they don't want the team rotated, because you've got to play your strongest 11 in every single game, but then they also want a big squad. It's like you kind of can't. One, doesn't really work without the other, and all this sort of stuff. So, I'm intrigued to see how many discussions we have next season about, he should have played a stronger team. But that's all the fun of it.
Yeah, Thursday, Sunday football. It's a quick turnaround, isn't it? We've got that again. We've had that previous years when Spurs were in the Conference League, Europa League as well. So, it's going to be a really interesting season. On the subject of, transfers and bolstering the squad, you were speaking to Ange in his post-match press conference and asked about the summer plans and, potentially bringing in players ahead of pre-season.
Yes, yeah, that was the one that got the kind of remark to the local journalist, because the local journalist, one of them, had just asked him. I say local journalist, I'm sure it was a very established Australian journalist. They were saying about like essentially how much rest will Postecoglou have, and he was like pretty much just the bus ride back to the hotel, because Ange was actually staying out there for a couple of days to see his mates rather than heading straight home with the squad. And yeah, so he's talking about his rest. And then the first question for me, so transfers, eh? Hey, hey, kind of thing. And you could just see he was like, see, this is what I mean. I don't get a chance to have a break because they want me to sign players today for tomorrow. And I was like, and he was like, he was joking. He was like, yeah, no, because my question was, that was something they did so well last season. I felt he changed the real dynamic there for me. And we had Vicario and Maddison came in early doors, and the other signings kind of followed reasonably swiftly. I think Van der Ven was probably the latest of that little before the season started bunch, and then obviously Brennan Johnson right towards the end. But yeah, just saying that's got to be the plan again, surely. And he was like, absolutely, yes, that's what we want to do. He said it's not easy. It's not, you can't go into it saying that will happen, because it's all very dependent on clubs and negotiating and all this sort of stuff. And everyone wants to do early business. But I think, especially with the Postecoglou style of football, got to get them in early. You've got to get them in early and have that full pre-season working on it, especially the big priority signings for me. And you saw that. And I think that was a big reason for how they started the season so well, because they'd been together, they'd got the football, they'd started to understand it, and they were able to go straight into season. Look, we then know that the Chelsea game just derailed so much, and the injuries and things like that. But if they can do that again, it's going to be a different squad as well. There's kind of two sides to this. He's going to be missing a lot of the players probably that go late into the competitions, the Euros and the Copa America. But the flip side to that, I guess, this season is that they know the Postecoglou way, those players. So that isn't the biggest hindrance it could be. It will be more those players that he has to bring in late on. I mean, I think we saw it with Brennan Johnson. I think it took Brennan Johnson a while to get used to the style of the play and what exactly was being asked of him. So yeah, he was very much like, yep, that's what we're going to do. And the other thing I asked him about was very much, you've spoken about how many times the club or the biggest area for growth that you see within the squad and the team is the attack. And I said, you want to sign attackers, don't you? Pretty much was how I put it. And he was like, absolutely, absolutely, that's what we want. From what I understand, they'll go for a striker, they'll go for a winger or two. Interestingly, I saw some little bits and pieces about Callum Hudson-Odoi kind of out there in recent days. Within Spurs, there kind of seems to be a pushback against that, and not someone they're going for, which is quite interesting. Because I could understand that for a couple of reasons. The homegrown perspective, which is something that Spurs have really got to keep close an eye on, but also the fact that we know Forest have to sell players. And he was a player that Spurs looked at last year, or certainly was presented to Spurs last year. But yeah, current feeling seems to be that that's not someone they're going for. But yeah, it's. I mean, we'll go into detail on this over the summer. This is the thing. It's too early to. This is why I think we're going to see this. We're going to see names linked, and then we're going to suddenly see no, they're not, and that's because we're at that. It's almost like the silly stage of it. Whereas I feel like as we get towards the mid to end of June, you'll start to really see the proper names kind of there. Oh, that was the other interesting thing that Ange said. He said, we've got a plan and I'm really comfortable with it. And I think that's quite a big thing. As someone that was out on the 2019 tour in, where was that? Shanghai.
Far East.
Yeah, Singapore and Shanghai. And seeing Pochettino looking so thoroughly peed off, demotivated, whatever, because of the lack of transfers that he'd had done. I think he'd only had Ndombele at that point. If only he knew what was to come. He'd have been even more frustrated. But yeah, having seen a manager so unhappy with the way a transfer window was going, to see Postecoglou straight off the bat be really happy about the plan that lies ahead. Obviously, they've still got to do it. It's just a plan at this moment. But I thought that was quite a big positive to come out of that they're kind of, he and Johan Langer, that was something I learned when I was in Sweden. Did I say that before? That it's Johan Langer, not Johan Lang. Okay. Always been calling him Johan Lang. One of his friends told me that. Interesting. Yeah, Johan Langer, Rob McKenzie, chief scout, and Ange obviously have been going over this plan for, I think he said it's been in place for a few months now. And it will just be about, I suppose, the green light that they get from, I suppose it's Scott Munn and Daniel Levy nowadays. But yeah, I think that's really interesting. It's going to be across the squad. He's already said that. They want another centre back. They want a striker. They want a winger or two. They'll want, I would say they'll probably look at a 6 and an 8 in the midfield. The Conor Gallagher stuff is not going to go away until he signs a new deal. If he does sign a new deal or he joins someone, whether it be Spurs or not, but we know he's someone that Postecoglou likes. At least one fullback, I would say as well, because there's the natural backup isn't there. I'm intrigued to see whether one of Davies or Emerson stays or not. Emerson, you get some money for if he wants to go. That's no guarantee either. He's very happy at Spurs, Emerson Royal. Ben Davies is that little kind of crossroads now of a year left. What do you do, kind of thing? He's a very versatile player, and I think most managers would want him in their squad. But does he naturally fit the inverted wing back, left back role? I'd say no. Will he get chances at centre back? Unless there's an injury crisis, maybe not. So is there going to be the required game time for him next season? But obviously he's like a stalwart of the team now and one of the kind of experienced calm heads. So that's going to be a decision that Postecoglou and the squad, the club will have to make. But yeah, he was asked whether he was confident that he can keep the players he wants to keep this summer. And he said, yeah, there's got no evidence otherwise. He said, you never know. Sometimes things can happen. Obviously, they suddenly lost Harry Kane, obviously, didn't they? 2 days before the season started. So you never know. But he did seem generally positive about everything. So we'll see where he's at in a month's time when we kind of reconvene with him, or just over a month's time. He may look like Poch did on that tour, but I don't think that'll happen. I think they know there's a bit of pressure on to make sure he gets the round pegs to the round holes in his system, because he's made some promises. You know, he said that they're going to challenge up there near the top. So yeah, they've got to build the squad that does that, and exactly like you say, build a squad that can handle the rigors of a very expanded Europa League campaign as well. So yeah, it's going to be a busy one for you and me, mate. We're going to have to write a lot and doing a lot of digging and a lot of talking to various people. Well, keeps us busy. Otherwise, we'd just be writing about the weather, wouldn't we?
Yep. I think it sounds good though, doesn't it? In terms of everyone's aligned, the plans are in place now. It's about putting the plans into practice, because he already does have a good squad at Tottenham. It's just about adding a bit more quality, a few more options, which Tottenham do need if they are to challenge towards the top. So as he himself has said, he's got lofty ambitions for this football club, and it's not just going to happen like that. You've got to add the quality there, and it's going to be really interesting what happens now with Conor Gallagher, given what's happened at Stamford Bridge this week. With Mauricio Pochettino going, I'm taking it you woke up to that news. Were you shocked?
No, I'm not shocked. Are you shocked at anything that happens at Chelsea? It's just, honestly, Chelsea makes Spurs look normal. And that is a feat and a half, I tell you. Yeah, but I did. Yeah, we did all kind of wake up to that. I actually may have been one. Would that have been the one where I had 3 hours and I might have looked at my phone briefly at some point, even though telling myself I shouldn't? I think that's what it was. The way he was talking towards the end of the season, it was a bit like, yeah, that could happen, I suppose. I wouldn't be stunned if he ends up at Man U.
Yeah. But I mean, still a surprise in the fact that they're allowing him to go when Chelsea obviously have turned the corner in recent weeks. They were 3 points off, almost finishing above Spurs.
Isn't it since December the third or fourth highest points total?
I think they've only lost one Premier League game, maybe since January. Oh yeah,
honestly, they make Spurs look patient with managers, and this is the first season the Spurs have had a manager for a full season since 2018-19.
Yeah.
So
but then you look at the names in the frame for the Chelsea job, and you're thinking, are they going to do a job as good as Poch? Are they as good as him? No.
Do you know what? So we can bring this back to Spurs very quickly. That's really interesting that you used to say that, because I watched something about, I can't remember what the title was of it, but there was an AIA thing where Postecoglou spoke to a very good Australian sports broadcaster about, it was just about various kind of, there's a lot of emotional stuff. It was called like, I can't remember the name of it now. It's really, honestly, look it up. I don't know how you're going to, because I haven't given you any information about the name, but you'll find it. Honestly, I think Spurs put it out on their channels. It's a 3-part thing. And interestingly, the reason I bring it up is because within that, he's asked, are you a better manager now than you have ever been in your life, in your career? And he says, absolutely. He said, every mistake you make, everything about you in your career creates a better version of you later on. And he said, and this is why I bring it around to this, is he said, that's why it annoys me so much when clubs don't give young managers a lot of time, because what did you expect? They are still managers learning their trade. They are very much, as the club grows with them, they're growing too. And it was a really kind of interesting, like little, I suppose, a dig at a lot of the clubs out there. And look, I know Poch now probably isn't the youngest of managers anymore, but he was working with a very young squad. And like you say, a lot of the names coming in are going to be big risks. They're going to be people that have to learn and on the spot. Yeah, I always find that fascinating. People, especially like people like McKenna, when they come up and you've got that really difficult decision of, you're on a high, you're at your peak of where you were in this little stage of your career. Do you join a club? Do you go up with your club and potentially risk kind of losing the luster of your reputation because they might go down? Although it hasn't harmed Vincent Kompany in any way, shape, or form, seemingly. I guess it helps if you're a big former player in the game. Or do you jump to a bigger club because it's the first chance? But it doesn't work out. I mean, I suppose Lampard, didn't he? Went from Derby to Chelsea, and that all was a bit of a mess as well. But no, it didn't surprise me in any way. But we don't want to make this a Chelsea podcast. But I know why you mentioned it, because it does kind of have an effect on Spurs. I think that's the big thing for Spurs next season, is that Chelsea, another overhaul. It's going to be Man United, probably. We don't know what's going to happen with Ten Hag, but that could go either way, it sounds like, at the moment as well. Liverpool, completely new stuff under Arne Slot. We don't know how that's going to, although you and I both did our research into him quite a bit. Was it last? Yeah, it was last year, wasn't it? Oh, it feels like
12 months ago.
It's amazing. Man City will be Man City. Arsenal will strengthen, you would imagine. But yeah, when Ange says about challenging next season, you can understand it's kind of nicely shaping up for him to maybe be the stable club, which very rarely has been said about Spurs for a while now, among a lot of clubs that are in a bit of chaos. So yeah, who knows? Who knows? Get those deals right over the summer, and they could seize on that chaos and plough a furrow for themselves through it.
Yeah, won't be long till the fixtures are out as well. I think that's probably about 3 weeks away now.
It just makes it. You just made me think of Sonny coming through the mix zone. Have you seen the clip?
No.
In Australia. So he came through the mix zone. And he's such a lovely guy, Sonny. He kind of went along various members of Spurs staff and given them all hugs because it was the last time he was going to see them. And then he saw us standing on the other side, and obviously a few of the Australians. I didn't call for him because we'd already had him in the press conference the day before, and he answered some questions I gave him really well, actually. And then some of the Australian ones were like, Sonny. And he just turned to them and went, please, just let me have a holiday. I want to rest. I want to go home. It was so funny. And he was almost like pleading to let him go. And it's like, you can't say no to Sonny when he's like being that way. And he was like, I did a press conference for you. And it was just so funny the way he said it. Just when you said about the fixtures there, it made me think like, can't we just have a rest? It's already back. But yeah, we all love fixture day. You and I both start early on that day. We start getting everything all ready for the season ahead, and we can start plotting what games that we're deliberately going to miss and stuff like that. When you book your many holidays. I think someone's keeping a tally on our holidays, by the way.
Whenever You've had more than me this year.
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. But we won't go into that in case I'm wrong. So fixtures will be interesting. You always get people that find it really interesting, and you always get people that say the same thing every year of, it's just the same thing. You're going to play everyone at some point. It's just what order. But the order does kind of make a difference. And I'll always say this. And we saw it this year. The way those that group of games clustered towards the end of the season was rubbish. It's a nightmare. If you can spread them out, I know postponements will change them slightly, but if you can get a bit of an even spread and you can get a kind of run in and things like that, of course it does have an impact. The way that the fixtures are spread out. But yes, it is true. You're going to play every team twice. We know that. You don't have to tell us that every time we put the fixtures out.
I'm sure it'll be Spurs at home first day, Spurs away on the final day, as has been the case for, I think since the 2-2 draw against Everton 2019.
They had a little run of being away at Newcastle on the first day, didn't they?
Yes, they did. Yeah. That was what, 2018?
God, was it that long ago? Wow.
Delhi did that celebration in the green kit, which they ended up wearing in the Champions League semi-final.
What a memory. Ajax. What a memory you have.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
And I'm sure in terms of the fixtures as well, it'll be the usual nightmare run in April, as has been the case in the past 2 seasons. But yeah, I mean, that's a few weeks away. Anyway, just on the subject then, as you mentioned, Sonny in the mix zone, you did a couple of interviews as well when you were out in Australia, James Maddison and Guglielmo Vicario.
Yeah, I mean, James Maddison was more kind of a mix zone interview with lots of people there. And it was only a short one. It was I think it's about 90 seconds or so, just literally because they were trying to get on the coach. They were going straight to the airport for their flight. But it was still quite interesting, the little bits and pieces he said. He said he was asked about Ange and did he realise how the noise for him and the cheers and all that sort of stuff? And he was like, yeah, he's quite popular, isn't he? Ange is a good man. He's a great character. I love working for him, and to see him in his country with the support he gets here was nice to see. The first season of a new project is always challenging. It has its ups and downs, but I'm really enjoying working for him genuinely, and I think we can achieve big things, hopefully. The first year of many, I hope. And I thought that was really good because, Maddison hasn't quite been the Maddison that we saw at the start of the season. And he got dropped from a couple of games, didn't he, to the bench, and he could have quite easily been a little bit miffed about it all, but feels like he's very much still on the Ange train, and that's great because I think he's going to have quite an important part to play, really, as one of the vice captains of. Although, did you see when they did the little club awards, where the players were coming in and they were the players had voted for little awards, and he got biggest diva. He was not happy. You could see that. And then when he showed him in the dressing room, kind of thing, and that Sonny was like, "Cameras there, cameras on," kind of thing. He was like, "Oh, thanks lads." And he was actually acting like a diva. It was quite funny. But yeah, he is such a big player within that squad and a big personality. He's got a big part to play in making sure that they are 100% into what Ange wants them to do, and it becomes instinct rather than instruction. But yeah, so that was only a little quick interview, and he did speak about being absolutely knackered and going away with England and trying to convince Southgate to keep him in the final squad and trying to play well. Although he did say, time to go back, a nice long flight, maybe have a glass of wine, a couple of days off. And I was thinking, don't say that. I know that's what everyone probably does, but don't say that. You're about to go to the England squad. Look ultra professional. And no, but the other one I did, which was just purely me, out in Melbourne, was with Guglielmo Vicario. He was doing with Skippy a little session with some of the kind of kids from the community. It was really nice. It was Collingwood's AFL teams. I think it was their practice facility. I'm not sure if they actually play there as well. Maybe they do, but it was a really nice little session. And then Vic came over and we had a bit of a chat of things. And we went into all the important things really of this season. We spoke about the fact that just what a good keeper he is, but has had so few clean sheets, in relation to that. He's only had 7 clean sheets this season, and a few of those kind of came towards obviously Sheffield United at the end there. And he was really good on that. It was essentially saying you don't he doesn't judge a goalkeeper's worth by clean sheets, which is kind of the opposite of what many people would do. But I kind of understand what he's saying, because a clean sheet is a collective thing. It really is. Keeper can be outstanding and still concede 2 or 3 goals in a game. So yeah, I absolutely get that. And he said his whole philosophy is just built on the fact of be better than you were yesterday. That's all it is, and just keep improving. And the other thing that I asked him about was the set pieces and the issues. I didn't ask him the question that you suggested I asked him about. What was your question about Jack Harrison or something?
What was it?
Something like, was it definitely not a foul in any way, shape, or form, or something like
Yeah,
that?
it was something along those lines about a potential foul in there for Harrison's goal at Goodison.
Yeah, I didn't ask him that, but I did ask him about his kind of understanding of that, and he was really good on that as well. He kind of said maybe he rushed into thinking that he didn't need to adapt. I mean, I've actually got it right in front of me, his quote. He said, it's part of the challenge. It's a different culture, different football. In Italy, it's completely different, as in how they deal with fouls on the goalkeeper. They're very hot on that. He said, maybe I didn't want to waste time adapting, but sometimes you have to be really honest with yourself and say, okay, maybe I need just a bit of time just to know how these sort of tactics and especially set pieces work. And I thought that was really interesting. He's kind of admitting that maybe he wasn't fully kind of not prepared. Well, maybe he is prepared, or just understanding of how much adaptation he had to do, because obviously he started the season so well. And yeah, he was good, and he just essentially saying what they need to do, he feels, from set pieces going forward. It said, just don't be so worried about them. Just don't accept situations, as in try and win the first contact. Don't accept a block if someone's blocking you from running to get the ball. Try to win the ball back if they do. And he said it's just about adapting, and himself included. And he was really good on that. And then I asked him about the celebrations he does with the players when they, like, the defenders like head something away or defend something, and then mentioned that he'd almost broken Radu Dragic in half, and he kind of laughed at that, and he was just like, I love doing that. He says, I think it's really important to give them credit, because it's true. We see goal scorers are always like get all of the celebrations when someone makes an amazing challenge or a goal line block. There's a bit of a high five and everyone moves on. And he was just saying that, yeah, he said, I always celebrate if I make an important save. So if someone does an important block, header, tackle, whatever, I want to celebrate with them as if they have just done something that is very important in the game as well. And he says, and I want to bring passion to the pitch. I want to bring energy to the pitch. And, he feels that that's what's required when someone makes a difference. So it was, just really good stuff. And then got him to talk about Romero, Van der Ven, and Dragic. He just said, hands down, they're the best defenders he's ever worked with. Obviously, I was kind of, my initial thinking was, well, yeah, I suppose he's been in the lower leagues. He's obviously come up with Empoli, but then I guess in Italy, international keeper as well. So presumably he's lumping that in as well. And then I asked him about next season. And he said that we've done some good stuff this season. Next season, we can do great stuff. And he said, one more year of working together, I think there'll be some situations we can recognise and reach our best level. We just need to follow Ange 100% and try to do what he asks of us, and then we'll see. It's a long season. It's tough. The league is tough. We just have to focus, the old cliche of one game, then the next game. But we'll see. But yeah, it was... he's a really interesting guy to interview because his English is brilliant. It's absolutely fantastic English. He's so passionate. Everything he says, he actually speaks for quite a long time. I only had a certain amount of time with him, and it was a bit like, these are lovely long answers, but I'm not going to be able to ask about 5 questions at this rate, because he really is quite thoughtful in his answers. Very philosophical guy as well. He's becoming a real leader, and you can see that in the way he talks. I said to him, because I said to him, I hadn't spoken to him since pre-season last time. I said, so kind of we've had this whole year, and just asked him how it kind of had been across the season, and he said he just loved it. It's a really nice quote, actually. The first one, he says, "It's an exciting time. My first season in the Premier League at this fantastic football club, and there's been big challenges, of course, during the season, good periods and tough periods, but that's what football is made of." And he's said he's really looking forward to European football. He thinks that's really important for the club next season. So yeah, he's a great guy, Vic. He really is. he's just a very, like, even just watching him working with the kids, he's just a really kind of thoughtful chap, and that's kind of the squad they're trying to build at Spurs now. They're all just like good guys, but they've also got a bit of an edge to them on the pitch, and that's what they're going to need.
Yeah, I was listening to Ange's, season review when he was speaking to the club, and keyline what he mentioned in it was, over the next few years, Tottenham fans are going to have, some real heroes to celebrate at the club, because you've got players who've been at the club for 1 year or have just come in and had the first season at Tottenham, and they've basically, if that's the baseline for the performances, then they can go on to do great things. So Ange's, convinced that a number of the players, and I'm sure he's probably alluding to the likes of Vicario, Mickey van der Ven, Destiny Udogie, Pat Matasar, who are going to become, household names in the Premier League and help drag Tottenham up towards the top of the league. I think for Vicario, he's had a really, really good first year at the club. I think he'll probably have learned from the set pieces, the issues at times, and that was clear to see on the final day against Sheffield United. I don't know if you spotted this when you were watching it, but he was, pushing Austin Trusty, the Sheffield United defender, when they're having a long throw. Ended up pushing him to the ground at one point, and then
Dragishin penalty.
And then Dragishin came in and offered a bit of protection, be a bit like his bodyguard. But now I think Vicario's had a really strong first year at the club. I can remember probably about a year ago, when he was signing, there were all these question marks, like, why is Tottenham spending 70 million on Vicario when David Raya's there?
Yeah.
Vicario's been incredible, and I think every
Tottenham
Tottenham
Van der Ven, though. Van der Ven was the cheap option compared to Tapsoba at the time, apparently, and he's been, for me, if he's fit the whole season, he's probably in that team of the season. I think the Premier League team of the season.
Yeah, probably up for the Young Player of the Year award as well. Really, really good season. I think. And I mean, Spurs, probably maybe stumbled over the line a bit in the final weeks. 5 defeats in the last 7 games, but they were never really out of the top 5 all season. They've got a Europa League berth for the 24-25 campaign. Number of positives to take, and I think they can really kick on the ranch next season.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with all of that. I guess it's not just young players. There's quite a young coaching staff as well on the whole. Whether we'll see changes, I was asking Ange about that ahead of the Sheffield United game, and he was like, well, it may be that we add to it. It may be that we have additions behind the scenes. The club, he said, have been very supportive in asking if he wants more support staff and stuff like that. So I still just have this funny feeling we might see some changes in that staff. He was really bigging up Mile Jedinak, obviously in Australia, but he was doing that as well. So whether I just wonder with Mile Jedinak whether he ends up a bit like when a doctor's learning and they kind of go on a rotation and they learn different departments, whether Mile Jedinak will maybe doing something different next season. I don't know. That's just me absolutely guessing. But I wonder, as part of his education, whether he moves on to a different area or not, whether you've got Chris Davies, was wanted by Swansea, whether he ends up getting kind of taken by a managerial job somewhere. Ryan Mason wants to be a manager. Matthew Wells, I think, wants to be a manager at some point as well. So that's the thing. And the way Postecoglou works, he wants his coaches to go on and do that. He's not someone that would ever step, and that's why we see him kind of have so many different almost disciples, as it were, because he's not phased. If there's a great opportunity comes up for a coach, he will tell them to go. He won't want to lose them, but he will tell them, go. It's your career. It's fantastic. So I do wonder whether we'll see a little bit of change there or not, because he just brings in another person and trains them up in his way. But yeah, if they do stay on, all of them, then they'll be learning, and they're constantly learning about his way. He kind of admitted that himself, that not all the players and staff had 100% bought into what he wants them to do yet, because it is a very extreme, different way of thinking about the game. So yeah, it's just another big summer pre-season. I think it's going to be important for a lot of the solidification, I think, of the way he wants this club to be. And yeah, like you said, it did limp over the line. That's absolutely fair to say. The middle bit of the season, some people kind of are saying, "Oh, you know, haven't been the same since the start of the season." I think that's harsh because of how much happened in the middle of that season to them. They got hammered by injuries. They really, really did. You know, let's not forget they went to the Etihad with Emerson Royale and Ben Davies in central defence, didn't they? And came away with a point as well. So I think, apart from some iffy results during that time, that like the Villa game, you know, the Villa game they should be winning 21. It's like they created so many chances in that home game. I think a lot of the football was there during that period. It just they didn't maybe have the quality because of missing numbers to get them over the line sometimes. So yeah, I'm quite excited about next season, and he will have learned as well. He's constantly evolving and tweaking what he does, Postecoglou. This idea that he kind of just sticks to this very one way of doing it. He even mentioned that himself the other day. He said, "People think I've like got just one plan." He said, "I've probably played every system and formation in my 25, 26 years as a coach possible. I will often do that within a game. We'll change system and formations, but people just get it stuck in their head that there's this is oh, someone said that, so it must be true." And I can see that they play with this really attacking way, and it's not how it is. But he will also have learned about the Premier League. I look back at the quotes he said in his first press conference, and he said he will learn about the Premier League as he goes through it. So next season, you'll see, even at his age, 58 years old, a more experienced manager because of this first season. So we've said it before, but the second seasons under Postecoglou are always pretty exciting. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. Right, we'll leave that there for today's latest episode of Gold Guest Talk Tottenham. We'll be back early next week to reflect on the 23-24 season as a whole and then look ahead to the 24-25 campaign. So as ever, thank you for listening and just keep with us at football.london for all your latest Tottenham news. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/goldguest. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and you'll help support our podcast. The link is in the episode description box.